Welcome to today's 5-minute professional learning bite presented by CAPITALISE Education. In today's professional learning bite, we're going to look at how we can apply the UDL framework to the planning, teaching and assessment cycle for all students in a classroom. Before we can start thinking about the UDL checkpoints that we'll use in our planning, teaching and assessing, we need to identify the strengths and challenges of each student in our classroom. We can do this using the following table. For each of our students listed in the table, we've identified the student's strengths. There are many ways we could do this through classroom observation, talking to our students, talking to their parents. There are many ways to collect information about our students' strengths. During this process of data collection, we also collect information about our students' challenges. These go into the table also. Using the information we have collected about our students' strengths and our students' challenges, we can then go to the UDL framework and start identifying relevant checkpoints that can be used to help overcome the barriers that a student might have associated with their challenges. But we can also look at the checkpoints that we could use to harness our students' strengths. Now that we've identified the characteristic, functional impact and relevant checkpoints from the UDL framework that could support our student on this autism spectrum, we need to start moving into the planning process. This is where the research of Vygotsky comes in. He claimed that the learning growth is the distance between the actual development level as determined by independent problem solving and the level of potential development as determined through problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers. And we'll be applying this process to our planning. This quote from the movie Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse illustrates Vygotsky's theory. We are a team, me as the teacher who can do it, you as the student who can do it, just not as well. This quote really highlights the concept of the zone of proximal development developed by Vygotsky. Vygotsky argued that there were 4 steps in the zone of proximal development where a student moves from what they can do by themselves into what they can do with others before they develop it internally. He argued that the first stage is contextualization, contextualizing the learning a student is going to do. The second step is the process where the teacher engages in scaffolding. The third step is collaborative group work. And the fourth step is when the student internalizes the learning themselves. This is illustrated by a quote from Vygotsky, "Through others, we become ourselves." Let's have a look at how the planning process developed by Vygotsky can be applied to the UDL framework. During the planning, teaching and assessment cycle, principle 1 of engagement flows through everything. Vygotsky talked about the first stage as being contextualization, where the teacher contextualizes the learning. This applies to principle 2 of the UDL framework, representation. The second step, teacher scaffolding, also relates to the principle 2 of the UDL framework around representation. Teachers representing information to students in multiple ways. The third step in Vygotsky's learning process is group work. This is where principle 3 of the UDL framework, action and expression, starts to become involved. The final step, internalization, also involves the third step or the third principle in the UDL framework, action and expression, because in the last 2 steps of the learning process, students demonstrate what they know and understand in multiple ways. This is a way of looking at how we can embed the UDL checkpoints into the 4 stages of contextualization, teacher scaffolding, group work, and internalization. This table is useful because we can go back to our UDL checkpoints that we identified earlier and include them where they fit appropriately within Vygotsky's learning process. We then take the UDL checkpoints that we identified earlier and start applying them to the 4 stages of Vygotsky's learning process. We eventually end up with UDL checkpoints that we can apply at each of the 4 stages of Vygotsky's learning process. These checkpoints could be used for one lesson or a series of lessons over the 4 stages of the learning process. That is today's 5-minute professional learning presented by CAPITALISE Education. At CAPITALISE Education, we believe that teachers achieve a lot more together than they do in isolation. As the African proverb goes, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.